Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Administrator Regan, for joining us today. I think we've walked through a lot of issues. I really want to highlight your commitment, or at least the EPA's decision to look at an all-of-the-above energy solution for our country right now, particularly at a time when your son, my daughters are having, expense at the gas, but as well as the supply chain that provides everything for our families.
Yeah.
We're looking at a situation where we enjoyed having you and the president in Iowa at a little ethanol plant in Menlo. At this facility, the commitment was made that ethanol was part of this all-of-the-above solution. And at that time, the president guaranteed a waiver for year-round E15. Now, your agency has looked at a 2024 opportunity to have ethanol be part of the solution for our energy challenges. But before us today, the EPA, and we've sent a letter to this earlier in the year, highlighting that we're going to shut down EPA sales over the course of this summer. I'd like to understand, why is that?
We're going to shut down
The sale of E15 year-round
for Iowa?
for the country.
I don't think we've issued a shutdown for the sale of E15. I think last year, E15 received an emergency waiver, which has a limited lifespan. And so each summer, if we're going to use that emergency waiver.
So let me ask you this, are you going to use that
conditions on the
emergency
ground.
waiver this summer?
Well, as I've said earlier today, we're taking a look at that. All options are on the table, and that waiver is available, but there must be certain conditions that are present. And the reason I'm saying it this way is because previous administrations have used that waiver, and the courts have immediately struck them down for not meeting that.
Do you know how many days until the EPA will make that decision? Because we've been asking for this for a while.
Sure, and others have as well, and I don't have an answer for you. I can say.
So here's my challenge. Look, Iowa farmers are already in the field, farmers across the area, producers are already in the field. It's not a remote job. It's not something that you can phone in. The reality is we have 11 days before suppliers are going to have to make a decision whether they're going to continue the sale of E15. And the reality is for your family and mine, in the Midwest, that is a massive increase in the price of fuel costs for those both using it and those providing that supply chain. Do you think within the next 11 days we'll be able to get an answer on this?
I can tell you that my staff has not come to me with the level of evidence that we need to make that decision today.
What has changed from last year? Last year we were told it was the war in Ukraine. Last year we were told that fuel prices were high, and the president himself demanded that this was a way that we could provide affordable fuel for families. What has changed from last year?
And you've listed a number of conditions that were present last year. And
I would offer they're present today as well.
And also there were a number of conditions that DOE indicated that were present as well. And so I can tell you that I'm talking with Secretary Granholm and DOE, and my folks are looking at this. I am not in a position, nor should I be legally, to tell you today, especially if the evidence isn't present right now.
We would like to have an answer ideally within the next 11 days. I know that's a high-pressure environment, but so is the rest of the country under it. I'd like to move on to WOTUS.
And if the conditions exist on the ground within those 11 days, then you'll see this EPA move.
I look forward to that. Thank you. Specifically on WOTUS, many of our colleagues have highlighted here that your ability to redefine this is causing a number of individual farms a lot of money on a daily basis. In my home state of Iowa, Ms. Regan, nearly 97% of my state would be impacted by the Biden administration's definition of WOTUS. Now that is the epitome, in my opinion, of a lot of government overreach into individual family farms. So here's my ask. As opposed to the exclusions and exemptions which impact a very small number of people who have jumped through the wickets to be able to get an answer back, would EPA consider scrapping this process, restarting and working with members of Congress to really move this forward so that individual farmers, as has been highlighted, aren't being fined up to $50,000 a day, ultimately potentially shutting down their farm and the food network for the country?
That offer has been made to my two predecessors, and two Supreme Court justices have weighed in, and we've seen multiple courts across the country weighed in. I can tell you that I worked with members of Congress, I worked with the agriculture community, and I recognize that this isn't exactly what everyone wants, but that is because there are some constraints with the law of the Clean Water Act, in addition to what we've learned from cases from Obama and from Trump. Remember, the navigable waters rule under President Trump was vacated by multiple courts. So I get the frustration.
I appreciate that. In my remaining time, I'd like to say,
Secretary.
I don't want to rehash the last two administrations. I want to talk about where this administration can go forward to be a leader in this point. I appreciate your time, Mr. Chair. I yield back mine.
Well, Well, will the gentleman yield just a couple seconds here, your remaining time? Love to know, when did you reach out to the Agriculture Committee, and whom did you work with on WOTUS? Because I didn't get those calls. I didn't get that collaboration, and unfortunately, Ranking Member Scott had to step out, but I think he has been on board and sharing our concerns with WOTUS. So I would just, who did you talk with when you said you've engaged the Agriculture Committee?
Well, I talked with Chairman Scott. I mean, he was the chairman when I came in.
Okay.
And my staff, we'll get the names, but we've worked with a number of staff on this committee. I've also worked very, very closely, not saying we agree, but worked very closely with Zippy Duval and the Farm Bureau.
Specifically, you had mentioned working with the Agriculture Committee.
Yes.
So,
I think I said community, but I will.
I'm sorry, well, if
think
you
I
said community, I misunderstood.
But committee as well. I've worked and reached out with Chairman Scott as well. So I don't want to say we have not engaged with this committee either.
Okay, well, there's one side of the aisle you haven't engaged in, and I'll follow up with Ranking Member Scott.